Everyone has that one movie that lives in their head rent-free. That movie they keep coming back to time and time again. Maybe you want to relive the feeling of going on a grand adventure, so you rewatch Lord of the Rings. Maybe it's the feeling of falling in love, so you rewatch Titanic. Or maybe you want to be reminded of the innocence you once had as a child and first discovered the internet, so you rewatch Two Girls One Cup every now and then. I've never been one to rewatch anything for the majority of my life. I was always of the belief that it was a waste of time. Why watch something when you already know what's going to happen? That's time I could spend on experiencing something new. Maybe the feeling of wanting to relive something came with age, as I was already an adult when I first wanted to experience something again for the first time. I remember the day vividly. It was raining, but I took a bus ride for 2 hours to get to the city. I was going to watch this niche animated film that was playing in a small independent movie theater. I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, so truth be told, I really wanted to eat ramen at a nearby restaurant, or I would have stayed home that day. I bought my ticket at this old rundown theater and sat down in a corner alone. There were only about 5 people in there watching this film. I watched this movie and I was in awe. I felt all the emotions, from happiness, anger, sadness, you name it. And when the credits rolled, I finally understood. I wanted to experience this again. I went back a few days later to that movie theater, then a week later when it was the last showing. I even went back a few months later when they showed it again dubbed in English. I can't even count how many times I've seen it since, when I eventually bought the DVD for myself. I've quickly developed this obsession with this movie ever since it was released only a few years ago. That movie I saw alone that one rainy day, that honestly might have even changed my life, is A Silent Voice, or A Shape of Voice. I'm in love with so many things in this film, it's hard to tell you one single thing that keeps me coming back to it. Every time I watch it, I feel like I learn something new from it, and in turn, learn something new about myself. If I had to pick one thing, however, it would be the main protagonist of the film, Shoya Ishida, and how he makes me feel inside. I probably should have worded that differently. I'll take a short pause after that. Before this film, I have never been able to connect with a character on an emotional level before. I've always hated the cliche thing in video games of a silent protagonist, or in animes where they give their main characters the driest personality to make them more relatable. It's especially bad in those harem shows. Yeah, sure, he's a loser like me, but he's also got 7 different girls fighting for his attention, while I'm ordering a care package from Tenga every month. And that's why I'm in love with Shoya. He's someone with a defined personality despite not being the most talkative person. He's not a blank slate for people to latch onto. He feels like a real person you know, or in cases like myself, someone you see a lot of in yourself. You can tell pretty much everything about him from how he presents himself. He's someone in high school with no friends. He's awkward in social situations, someone with severe social anxiety, and someone who even has suicidal thoughts. The movie starts off with Shoya, mere seconds away from committing suicide. He's been planning it for a while, and today's the day. Before he goes through with the deed, he hears fireworks that snap him back to reality. He decides that he wants to do one last thing before going through with jumping from that bridge. How did he reach this point in his life? The movie then flashes back to when he was a happy, carefree child. You can tell how different they are simply by the way he walks. The difference is night and day, but it's still the same person. He's sitting in class one day, and they get a new transfer student. Her name is Shoko, and she's deaf. The movie then spends about 30 minutes showing how he and his classmates bullied this poor girl. It starts off as confusion at first, then it leads to them ignoring her advances at friendship before getting annoyed with her, until ultimately ending in harassment. Shoya throws dust in her face, writes mean things for her to read, rips out multiple of her hearing aids. It's raw, brutal, and makes you feel terrible watching it. When her bullying gets too out of hand, his class uses him as a scapegoat and pins all the blame solely on him. The people he considered friends now bully him instead, since they can't pick on Shoko anymore. This beginning of the film really drives home the fact that, well, kids are assholes. A lot of the time they're assholes just for being the sake of being assholes. His actions may say otherwise, but Shoya isn't a demon spawn. Deep down he's a really nice kid. You can see this when the bullying goes too far, and he wants to own up to his actions but hesitates. He starts bullying her at first because he sees everyone around him dislike her, and he wants to make his classmates laugh. He's just a kid being an asshole cause that's what kids do. I've never bullied someone to this degree, but sure, I was an asshole growing up too. I threw rocks at kids for no reason during recess, stole from the school store just because, talked shit about people behind their backs, took a dump in the boys' urinal. I don't know why I would do those things. I was 7. I just did them because they seemed fun at the time. Ignore that last one, by the way. That wasn't actually me. It was my friend, I promise. Looking back on it now, some of the things I did wake me up in a cold sweat at night out of embarrassment even 20 years later. Just saying we were kids doesn't justify these actions, and I wish I didn't do them. But they happened. It's really hard to forgive someone. In anime, this idea seems almost comical. People become actual terrorists, and the characters in that world will simply learn to forgive and live on. People find it a lot easier to forgive fictional characters because they're not real. But in reality, this isn't really the case. If anyone's ever gotten bullied before, have you ever forgiven that person for what they did to you? Maybe you have, but it probably wasn't easy at first. I mean, there's definitely some kids I've known growing up that I used to get into fights with, that I still wouldn't want anything to do with 10 plus years later. It might even come off as hypocritical coming from someone telling you this is their favorite movie, but maybe they're the same person from back then and haven't changed at all, I wouldn't know. And that's why I really love this movie. It understands that. He meets up with Shoko again years later, and surprisingly she does forgive him, but those around him don't. He gets called out by characters claiming he's only doing this to make himself feel better. She's hanging out with a kid that bullied her to the point that she had to transfer schools. It feels like a sick joke. There's this one scene that sticks with me. He meets the mother of Shoko years later and without a word, walks up to him and slaps him. I remember watching this scene in theaters and hearing shock at her actions, but she's not in the wrong. From her perspective, he's a terrible person. He bullied your daughter for no reason. He is scum. It really is that hard to forgive someone for what they did, and sometimes the hardest person to forgive in life is ourselves. I've probably never seen a more accurate representation of social anxiety in my life. The constant shots of people's feet while walking, the way he walks with no purpose in life, awkwardly realizing you're being a third wheel so leaving, trying to look someone in the face then quickly shooting your gaze to the floor, all of it, it's also painfully relatable, and I even find myself doing it years later. There's these X's over characters' faces. It may look crazy looking at it out of context, but it takes a total of 2 seconds to comprehend what it means. He's someone who wallows in his own self-hatred. He's someone who can't get over the guilt from his past. He believes he is nothing, that he is unworthy of others' friendships. The X's are there to protect him and others. He doesn't want to be hurt again like he was in the past, or to hurt others like he once did, so he refuses to look at them. And he refuses to listen to them. He wants to be isolated from the world, and the X's are a literal representation of this. Maybe it's cause I'm a dork, but it's touches like this that allow me to connect to this character more so than other films with real actors. It works so well because it's an anime. You probably won't see this make anyone's top 10 most beautiful animes because it's not as bombastic as some of the scenes that would come to mind, but I would consider this one of the best animated films. It's honestly astounding how much you can tell from how these characters move and the facial expressions they make. They say so much without actually saying anything at all. It even feels more realistic to how we move than actual life itself. It feels ironic to say something like that, considering I'll probably be showing the most unrealistic looking character on screen as I say this. I still think to this day anime gets a bad rep. I've told my mother to watch this movie, but she refuses because anime is for children, as she goes and watches the cheesy love stories on the Hallmark Channel. I mean, she could walk in on me mid-stroke to emergence and she'd just think I'm reading Pokemon or something. It's this mindset that led to this film not winning Best Animated Film of the year 2017, but instead losing to the fucking Boss Baby, which is also something that lives in my head rent-free. Award shows are a lot of crap and you shouldn't take them seriously, but the sheer ridiculousness of this is what I can't get over. I mean, if Boss Baby is so good, why isn't there a Boss Baby 2? Wait, what? To wrap up things, this movie isn't perfect or anything. I mean, anyone who's seen the movie will tell you these characters are awful. It's a movie all about self-development with some characters that really don't grow as people at all. As I've watched it multiple times, I feel like I've learned to come to terms with them. They do have some redeeming qualities. She's a pain in the ass, but her heart is in the right place, and well, actually I'm having trouble coming up with something nice to say. But she has that one line that I think is very sweet. You have to learn to love even the things you hate about yourself and move forward. For how much I dislike her, even she taught me a lesson. That just because someone refuses to change and become a better person, doesn't mean you don't have to. You should focus on yourself. The side characters aren't the main focus, but I still believe them to be somewhat realistic. I have a ton of friends like these. I know someone who's a pain in the ass but has good intentions. I know someone who is stubborn and refuses to listen and doesn't acknowledge their mistakes. I have a friend who's really jolly and a joy to be around. My friends tell me this is me in the group. Mostly because they believe we have a similar build. Maybe I should get some new friends. It's hard to call this movie a masterpiece. I mean, I consider it to be, but stuff like that is subjective. Not everyone will feel the same. To me, the movie is about him, and I think for what it's worth, it's perfect. Bullying a deaf girl sounds irredeemable, but they somehow managed to do it. I think this anime is really special. Sometimes you need a reminder on some of life's biggest lessons, and this anime captures that perfectly. Your past doesn't define who you are today. There are others that appreciate you. You don't have to spend your whole life in self-guilt. And most importantly, even though certain things can make life difficult sometimes, it doesn't mean that they're worth dying over. The only person you're stuck with at all times of your life is yourself, so you may as well learn to love yourself. And this anime taught me how to love myself. That's the end of the video, which means it's outro time. Nothing to promote other than this channel. If I'm on social media, my @ is most likely softhandsyou, as someone out there thinks they have softer hands than me and keeps stealing my name. If you like this video, maybe consider removing that blue X over that subscribe button and watching my other content. Thanks for watching, till next time.